because so much of the time it's your IT tech people on this side and the business people on this side, and they don't really know, even though they're the same nationality, they don't know how to talk to each other.
Hello and welcome to the AI Master Group podcast, featuring the people who are building the future of AI in their work today. I'm your host, Jim Griffin. I'm very happy to have as the guest today Dr. Raymond Pettit, who has 25 years of commercial and business experience in data science and applied analytics. He was the SVP of Research and Standards at the Advertising Research Foundation, and he's the author of 2 books on advertising research and marketing science. Most recently, he was the director at the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University. Ray received his bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan and his master's and doctoral degrees from the University of Illinois. Welcome, Ray.
Thanks, Jim. It's nice to be here, and I appreciate you having me on today.
We know each other very well. We've collaborated on a number of things, and so it's really a pleasure to have you here. I personally know that you've had a very storied career, including some very interesting, high-profile work. So maybe it'd be interesting to kick off by asking, were there any parts of your overall career journey that turned out to be, let's say, transformational or especially interesting in any particular way?
Yeah, Jim, actually the whole journey has been transformational because, as you know, I started out life as a school teacher, dabbled a little in school administration, but in '96, when I finished my doctorate, I realized I had the skills and the capabilities in data analytics mostly to maybe take a run at a business. So I started my own one-man consulting group and it never really looked back. I was so grateful to be able to go from place to place to place and build a career over time. Sometimes they were just fractional roles, but other times they were full-time positions in, high level or high impact groups like the ARF and comScore, Northeastern University, of course. So,
yeah, comScore. Tell me a little bit about comScore.
yeah, comScore was really interesting. It was my last full-time commercial job before I kind of blended into the academic side of things, although I never completely let go of the commercial. We built a very nice business around the concept of measuring the value and impact of your brands and products placed in content. So most people call it product placement or branded entertainment. And over an 8-year span, built quite a nice business with a lot of sports teams and studios and agencies in measuring this impact of branded entertainment on the viewer and how it contributed, added, integrated, or expanded the impact of your ads. So,
yeah, so that's something related to or maybe spot on for marketing mix modeling, where you're trying to infer the impact of something in a world full of ambiguity.
Exactly. Well, I was very lucky because I did work with one of the leaders at the time in market mix modeling, Market Share Partners, who has since have been purchased by Newstar and then now are part of TransUnion. But I was back in the early days, one of the first 8 employees, and we were doing, fairly high level econometrics at that point. But yes, it's the same idea of measuring your impact on, or response and impact on a consumer, viewer, purchaser, whatever you want to call it, shopper, based on what you present to them. So,
yeah, it's very interesting how you can really solve that problem and you wouldn't expect that you could.
Exactly. Well, it wasn't easy. It took quite a while to develop the product at comScore, I have to be honest. It was a couple of year process to actually make it work. But once it did, it was fine.
Yeah, so that would be a fun one. And then I know you've done projects in many different parts of the world, actually. I think there was one that was in Japan. If that's true, can you share? I mean, Japan, you're out of Illinois. How is it that Ray ends up getting called to do a project over there?
Well, interestingly enough, it was a Japanese company, but I actually didn't have to go to Japan. They had two major locations here in the U.S., but it was a Japanese firm. And yeah, that was like one of those transformational projects, I think. Sometimes I know you've run across them too. So this was when I was director of the Institute for Experiential AI. We basically had what's called an AI Solutions Hub, which was really a small consulting company that would gather clients and projects. We did about 2 million in revenue, believe it or not, in our first year. But long story short, this manufacturer in particular was interesting because it opened my eyes to digital transformation and kind of the lack of focus on analytics as part of the process. Even your, standard books on digital transformation in the last 5 years, they give very short shrift to how do you integrate analytics, measurement, evaluation of whether you're doing well or not. They have wonderful models of change, 4 or 5 pillars usually. But in this case, the manufacturer had a person in charge of the digital transformation. And she came to Northeastern actually looking for student help in analytics, believe it or not. And as we talked, I said, are you considering how analytics fits into your beautiful process they had created? And she said no. So we started talking. Long story short, it evolved into a 5-year plan where we would kind of be the guides, mentors, and advisors of how to plug in AI, machine learning especially, into this process they already had set up. So it had the visibility of executive leadership. The CEO approved it. And actually, I was able to start writing a book about the process, but unfortunately, the CEO left and they kind of pulled that out. But I have half a book written on that topic, and I still think it's a worthy topic to complete. But anyway, that really opened my eyes to maybe one of the the ways we're headed in the future. Now that we've kind of gone over the the wonderment of Gen AI this past year, I think now people want to know not just to tell me what to do, but what can I actually do? Show me what I can do, or help me take advantage of this new technology. It's not really new, of course.
So that's surprising that they actually hadn't thought about embedding analytics in the digital transformation project that they were doing.
I was surprised too. I think partially it was a very traditional company, so you had people doing Excel almost exclusively. You had, like, if someone left or died, God forbid, you don't know where that information went. So, part of it was bringing the data together. I just don't think they had thought much about AI, machine learning, raising the level of business analytics usage in the company, and also the impacts on the person that would have to change or adjust or upskill. So that, of course, leads to another topic about training, which I feel is at a crossroads in terms of where we are with AI and machine learning.
So tell me about that. What are your thoughts about training in regard to this crossroads?
Yeah, well, universities, and as you know, we've both worked at traditional MSBA type programs doing capstones and things like that. Traditional universities are, churning out graduates that are very probably technically skilled, but not necessarily a lot of experience in the business.
You're listening to the AI Master Group podcast.
Traditional universities are, churning out graduates that are very probably technically skilled, but not necessarily a lot of experience in the business. But companies themselves have business people who are more or less experts in what they're doing. They just don't have much in the way of analytics. And I actually discovered this when I was at clearly, when I was at UCSD and I was running the MSBA program, the company Petco is a local, had their headquarters locally in San Diego. And I went over, I was really just trying to interest them in maybe helping their data scientists better communicate what they're doing to the company at large. And they said, actually, they're doing a good job. Where we need something is the hundreds of managers and product people and brand people and pet experts who are being asked to do analytic works or even what do you call it, advise or manage analytics, but don't know anything about it. So I thought that was really interesting. So I went in and did a 4-hour workshop. I mean, you would have laughed a little, Jim. It was basic statistics and here's a neural network type of thing. But it was enough to, I had 200 people in the audience from the company. And the plan was then to give them just the fundamentals of data science, statistics somewhat, and then come back and do workshops using their data and showing them, literally, I would use SPSS just because it's easy to see what you're doing there instead of coding, and show them, here's what your data scientists did when they did their segmentation. Take a step-by-step look at what they actually did. Again, it's not to make these people analytic experts, although if they wanted to get the education, they could. They had a ready partner right there at UCSD. But more importantly, just so they understand the concepts and they can understand what their data scientists and AI folks are doing and start that conversation. You've been very good at explaining things. I don't know if you have a teaching background, maybe you do, but I found that to be one of the useful things. Talk about transformation over my career. Having had the educational experience in managing schools and curriculum and presentations and just being able to teach people, I found that to be very useful in our area, because so much of the time it's your IT tech people on this side and the business people on this side, and they don't really know, even though they're the same nationality, they don't know how to talk to each other. They're very poor at doing it. So that's been one of my strengths, is bringing those two pieces together. And I just stumbled onto it. I had no idea, but it turns out to be a very useful thing in businesses to have people like you and I that can do that type of translation, so to speak.
Yeah. Correct me if my thinking is wrong, but what I'm thinking is that the bigger stretch is usually for that data scientist to really get the domain expertise. They're looking at this data set and they just don't get it. There's this thing in there and they think it's an outlier and it should be deleted, and that's a crucial part of the whole business and so forth. Whereas on the other side, that person that's been working in the business for X number of years and has deep knowledge of the domain, it's not that much of a lift, and it's seeming like less and less every day for them to get access to tools that really enable them.
Yes. Well, I agree with you. It's interesting. 4 states apparently are trying to start AI literacy programs to service the community, not students per se. And they're having a little bit of trouble getting started, but there definitely is impetus behind it. And it's hard for them. One of the problems they're having is hard for them to come to terms with what do they actually teach. What does literacy mean? Does it mean just being able to use the tools or learn new tools as they come along, or does it need a deeper fundamental foundation for the person to be able to use things effectively? So yeah, I agree. It's not necessarily figured out yet, but I think that it's an important aspect that I hope to be more involved in. There's actually a firm that grew out of the University of New Hampshire, where I did a short advisory period project, I should say, called Northlight, and they're trying to do this. They're trying to set up an academy in the state of New Hampshire, trying to work with the governor and other folks interested in small to medium-sized businesses, because that's mostly what New Hampshire has. Medium sometimes being $1 billion company, by the way, but that's another story. Yeah, there's I think you'll see a lot of efforts like that coming forward, so that people can start to utilize these tools, whether it's being able to learn the new tools, or constantly refreshing and upgrading, Or, hey, you better learn your statistics and know what an outlier is. I had a great slide I used where it showed how a marketer looks at a brand journey, and it's a very complicated thing. I even had it in a foreign language. And then had the picture that the marketing scientist or the data scientist is just a regression line with, a line going through the dots and the points. And I said, that's how these two people, these two groups look at things so differently. And they kind of have to understand each other. It's, to the brand marketer, they're taking into account a lot of things and a lot of nonlinear creative things. And and of course, as you mentioned, the data scientist, oh, get rid of that outlier. But actually, that's the most important customer, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So that's on the business side, these people that have been working in brands and so forth. And then there's the other side of it that I know we're both very closely connected to, and that is these batches of students that are coming out of graduate programs. And I think one of the things that we share is that we both teach capstone courses. And we're aware that we're doing our best to try to prepare people for something that looks like the real world, although we're also aware that there's a certain limit to what you can do in 12 weeks or whatever it is. So, given that you've got that kind of a connection, I think you've been exposed to other kinds of approaches or initiatives beyond the classic capstone. And so, can you describe some of those other approaches that you might have seen and what you've learned from comparing one approach versus another?
Yeah, definitely. I won't go into the various challenges we've talked about, the MSBA type capstones, data science, MS. But yeah, one part of it is the limited time frame. It's only a certain part of the year. It doesn't align necessarily well with the company's real problems. Sometimes it's artificial in terms of the companies only share a certain amount of data. But an interesting alternative, which we developed, I mean, I thought about, but developed at the Institute for Experiential AI, was an old concept. It's called the apprenticeship model, and it's used by hospitals, particularly medical field, has interns working in real working hospitals for, I don't know how long, 2 years maybe, because they're dealing with life and death and sickness and health. So why not do a similar thing? And there actually is a movement in Germany called the Fraunhofer Institutes, which does this, believe it or not, and have a real working projects going on as part of your, let's say, your institute work at any time of the year. It doesn't have to be, fall semester or whatever. And then bringing the students in to work with the practitioners and academics as well, if it's a university student, and kind of learn by doing. I mean, it's the old apprenticeship model. You sit by the cobbler's foot for 10 years, learn what he does, and when he dies, you take over his business. So it's a very similar idea. It's a simple idea, actually. But to make it work is hard because universities in particular don't necessarily want a lot of people kind of sticking their nose into their relationships with companies and corporations. There's a lot of protection. But there is one shining example up in Canada. As you know, this is a firm called Alta ML based in Alberta, Canada. They've done a very nice job. Perhaps it's a different situation up there. The universities have been behind them. They've been able to fund these, what they call AI labs, and run students, and not just graduate students, but people who maybe want to come back for a career change. So they've actually gotten into that area. And done exactly that. They work for a year on projects, or a project if it's a big client. The companies pay the AltaML as part of the lab to be able to do this. It's almost like they pay up front and they get credits for the various projects they do. But as we looked at the U.S., everybody that we talked to seemed to like this idea, but it was very hard to actually make it happen for a variety of reasons in the U.S. And maybe that'll change. But to me, that's at least for data science. If we're really getting into the heavy-duty AI, machine learning stuff, I think that and having, like you said, having to know what the business side thinks, feels, and does, it's really one way to do it. I mean, to be honest, at the AI Institute, we had our first client wanted to run 12 it was a big company, communications company, but wanted to run 12 apprentices over a year. They would pay them. At the end, they would hire them. I mean, assuming they passed all the things. And they had mentors along the way. They had academic mentors, but they also had the practitioners they were working with and learning from that. And to this particular communications company, that seemed like a solution to a problem they were having, which is hiring grad students out of college. The grad students work 2 or 3 years and they go work to Google because they get paid more money. So that was actually a problem for them. So by doing this kind of pipeline, they were able to now have a reliable source. Of course, there was something written into this deal that they would have to stay at the communications firm for X number of years. So it alleviated that problem of them kind of running off to brighter pastures. So anyway, I think it has legs. It's just how do we make it happen, I guess.
It must, Ray, because when you talk to a dean at one of these schools or any kind of a senior leadership role at any of these universities, they're really deeply concerned about this. They don't want to just sort of hand off the students at the door and say, have a nice day, I hope it turns out for you. They want them to succeed. And they recognize that they lose a little bit of visibility. As soon as they get hired, it's a statistic. They were hired, and then you lose it from there. So that continuity, a long-term success is important to everybody, all the stakeholders, and especially the students.
Well, another aspect of this, I had mentioned to you the University of Albany. One of the things they're doing, which I hope is a trend, they've had 5 years. They're about 5 years behind the times at this point, I think. What they're doing now at Albany is what UCSD was doing in 2018. That is, in other words, have a large investment of money, setting up a supercomputing / AI institute combined, and having a big commercial client as part of the deal. So in this case, the U Albany is working. They've gotten $275 million from the governor of New York State, which is nice. They're ramping up this supercomputing center and the AI Institute to combine them. And NVIDIA and IBM are both key partners because they want to focus on chip design, chip R&D, and in setting up manufacturing. So there's a commercial aspect to this. I know universities are a little reluctant to get involved in these things, but I feel like it's going to be unavoidable, especially in this day and age, where it's such a great opportunity. I think universities kind of have to figure out how to make this kind of thing work, even if it's at a test stage to start out. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, this has been, as I fully expected, a very interesting conversation, Ray. I'm so glad we had a chance to reconnect again. If anyone is interested in getting in touch with you for any reason, what would be the best channel or way for them to do that?
Just probably my email, which I don't know if you can share it when you send it out. It's yarte67@gmail.com. I'm using that right now.
Oh, okay. Say that again. YAR.
YARTE67@gmail.com. Has meaning to me, but not to anybody else.
Okay. Well, once again, Ray, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
You've been listening to the AI Master Group podcast. I'm your host, Jim Griffin. Until next time, stay curious and stay in front.